This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to our daily roundup. We have a heavy slate of stories today, ranging from shocking betrayals to landmark legal decisions. Let's get right into the details of these developing cases.
A Mississippi woman's best friend plotted her fiery death.
An Alabama man receives life for a student's murder.
A TikTok mom died after a routine cosmetic surgery.
A Montana mother allegedly suffocated her 5-year-old son.
A Texas man killed his wife over back pain.
A New Jersey father sentenced for killing his infant.
An off-duty guard executed a teen returning a toy.
A South Carolina community settles after an alligator attack.
Starting in Mississippi,
The story of Lula Young is truly one of the most heartbreaking examples of betrayal you will ever hear. For 20 years, Linda Leadham was more than just a neighbor to Lula. She was her closest confidant and support system. As Lula battled breast cancer and leukemia, Linda was there to buy groceries and take her to lunch. But on a cold morning in December 1994, that friendship was revealed to be a facade. A fire broke out in Lula's home while she was sleeping, and though firefighters tried to reach her, she died from smoke inhalation. It wasn't an accident. Investigators eventually discovered that Linda had meticulously planned this fire to end her best friend's life. It was a diabolical plot that left the community of Horn Lake in absolute shock.
the details of the arson investigation are chilling because they show just how much effort went into the deception. Linda was the one who told firefighters exactly where Lula was, yet she was also the one who had arranged for the deadly blaze to occur. Lula's son, Michael, and her brother, Randy, had to rush back from a hunting trip, only to find their world destroyed. Lula was a fighter who had survived cancer and a difficult divorce, only to be taken down by the person she trusted most. This case, which was recently profiled on Oxygen's A Plan to Kill, highlights the terrifying reality that sometimes the greatest danger comes from within our inner circle. The betrayal wasn't just the murder itself, but the 2 decades of false friendship that preceded it.
Now to Alabama.
Justice has finally been served in the tragic case of Anaya Blanchard, a 19-year-old college student who was kidnapped and murdered in 2019. Ibrahim Yazid has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after being convicted of murder and kidnapping. The incident began at a gas station in Auburn, where Yazid spotted Anaya and followed her to her car. He forced her to drive away at gunpoint and eventually shot her before dumping her body in a wooded area in Macon County. The search for Anaya lasted a month and gripped the entire state. When her remains were finally found, it confirmed the worst fears of her family and the community. Yazid was already out on bond for another violent crime at the time, which sparked a massive legislative change in Alabama.
That legislative change is known as Anaya's Law, and it allows judges to deny bond for defendants accused of serious violent offenses. Anaya's mother, Angela Harris, spoke after the sentencing, noting that her daughter fought a violent criminal and ultimately helped get him off the streets forever. Attorney General Steve Marshall emphasized that this life sentence was the only appropriate outcome for such a senseless and brutal crime. The case faced several delays over the years, but the conviction in March brought a sense of closure to a family that has advocated tirelessly for justice. Anaya is remembered not just as a victim, but as a hero whose struggle led to laws that will protect others from similar predators. Her family takes solace in knowing that Yazid will never have the chance to hurt anyone else.
Moving to Ohio.
Rachel Tussey was a vibrant mother of 3 who shared her life with over 80,000 followers on TikTok. She was documenting what she called her mommy makeover, a series of procedures including a tummy tuck and liposuction, intended to help her feel better about herself. In her final video, she expressed excitement and gratitude, telling her fans she was in good hands. Tragically, she never woke up. A lawsuit filed by her husband alleges that the staff at Journey Light of Cincinnati and their anesthesia partners committed horrific medical malpractice. According to the complaint, an unqualified nurse administered lethal doses of fentanyl and Dilaudid during her recovery. This caused Rachel to go into cardiac and respiratory arrest, leading to catastrophic brain damage. She slipped into a coma and eventually passed away, leaving her family and followers in mourning.
The details of the lawsuit are particularly disturbing because they suggest a total failure of post-operative care. Rachel's husband was actually in the room and noticed her lips turning blue, and that she had stopped responding to his voice. Despite his desperate attempts to get her attention, she had become hypoxic, The lawsuit claims that the medical staff failed to provide adequate monitoring and that the emergency response was insufficient. The doctor who performed the surgery had reportedly already left the center when the crisis began. This case serves as a grim reminder of the risks associated with elective surgeries and the critical importance of professional anesthesia management. Rachel's family is now seeking justice for a woman who was simply trying to start a new chapter in her life, only to have it cut short by alleged negligence.
Next in Montana.
In a small town near Whitehall, Montana, a horrific scene unfolded that has left a community reeling. Catherine Garras is accused of deliberate homicide in the death of her 5-year-old son, Rain Tyler Blair. When deputies arrived at the home for a welfare check, Catherine reportedly opened the door and calmly told them that the boy was in his room. There, they found Rain with a plastic bag over his head. He was already dead. The motive Catherine allegedly gave to investigators was that she wanted to save him because she believed things would only get much worse for him. This chilling justification has left the family and the public searching for answers that may never truly explain such a violent act against a child. Catherine had been staying with the boy and his father for weeks without any prior incidents.
The boy's father is described as a devoted single parent who had built a life for Rain filled with love and laughter. A family friend started a GoFundMe to support the father, calling Rain a precious and beautiful light. The community is struggling to process how a mother could commit such an act, especially after being reintegrated into the family home. Catherine is currently being held without bond at the Jefferson County Jail, and her next court appearance is scheduled for June. There are no words to describe the pain of a father losing his child in such a manner, especially when the perpetrator is the person who should have been a protector. As the legal process moves forward, the focus remains on honoring the memory of a young boy whose life was taken far too soon under truly incomprehensible circumstances.
Shifting to Texas.
A shocking act of domestic violence has devastated a family in Cloverleaf, Texas. Jose Romero, 43, is charged with the murder of his wife, Yanira Marin de Romero. According to police, the couple was arguing in their home when Jose opened fire on Yanira while she was in the bathroom. What makes the motive so baffling is Jose's alleged statement to detectives. He claimed he killed her because she didn't take his back pain seriously. This explosion of violence happened while the couple's 3 children, aged 3, 8, and 13, were inside the house. Fortunately, the children were not physically harmed, but the emotional trauma is unimaginable. Relatives had previously described the marriage as nearly perfect, noting that the couple had been together since their adolescence and were the pride of their extended family.
The reality of the situation is a stark contrast to the image the family projected. Jose actually called 911 himself to report that he had shot his wife. When deputies arrived, they found Yanira with multiple gunshot wounds, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The children are now left without both of their parents, as Jose remains in the Harris County Jail. Family members have expressed their heartbreak on social media, struggling to accept that a man they respected could commit such a heinous act over a seemingly minor disagreement. It is a tragic reminder of how quickly domestic situations can escalate into lethal violence. The community is now rallying to support the 3 children who have lost their mother and seen their father arrested for her murder, all because of a dispute over physical discomfort.
Now to New Jersey.
In Ocean County, a father has been sentenced to 25 years in prison for the death of his 3-month-old daughter. Ruben Santiago pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter after a brutal beating that left the infant with a fractured skull and a brain bleed. The defense argued that Santiago was overwhelmed and stressed about his financial situation, but the judge was unmoved by these excuses. The autopsy revealed a horrifying pattern of abuse, showing that the baby had 7 broken ribs and a broken wrist in various stages of healing. This suggests that the infant had been suffering for most of her very short life. Santiago initially tried to claim he had accidentally dropped the girl, but the medical evidence clearly contradicted his story. The judge noted that millions of people face financial stress without resorting to harming a helpless child.
The sentencing brings an end to a case that saw the girl's mother initially arrested as well. However, charges against her were dropped after her attorney proved she was not home during the fatal incident. As part of his plea deal, Santiago exonerated her from any wrongdoing. During the hearing, Santiago became emotional and claimed he would trade his life for his daughter's if he could. But the prosecution emphasized that his actions were unjustifiable, and that he took his frustrations out on a completely defenseless victim. The 25-year sentence reflects the severity of the crime and the prolonged suffering the infant endured. It is a somber conclusion to a case that highlights the absolute necessity of protecting the most vulnerable members of society from those who are supposed to care for them. The community remains haunted by the details of this tragedy.
Moving to Washington.
In a suburb of Seattle, a tragic misunderstanding led to the death of 17-year-old Hazrat Ali Rohani. Aaron Brown Myers, an off-duty security guard, has been convicted of second-degree murder and assault. Myers was waiting for his son at a martial arts class when he saw Ali and two other teens carrying what he thought was a real handgun. In reality, the boys were simply returning a malfunctioning BB gun to a Big Five sporting goods store. Myers, acting on his own perceived authority, confronted the teens at gunpoint. Despite the boys repeatedly telling him the gun wasn't real, Myers ignored them. When Ali dropped the BB gun and turned to walk away, Myers fired 7 shots, hitting the teenager 6 times in the back. The prosecution argued that Myers made lethal decisions based entirely on false assumptions and labeled the boys as criminals.
The defense tried to argue that Myers was attempting to prevent a robbery and that the BB gun looked identical to a real Glock. They claimed he didn't want anyone to get hurt and felt he needed to act. However, the jury didn't buy the argument that an off-duty guard had the right to execute a fleeing teenager who had already surrendered his weapon. Ali, who went by the name Ali, was described as a young man just going about his day before he was gunned down. Myers now faces between 20 and 28 years for the murder, plus an additional 10 years for firearm enhancements. This case has sparked intense debate about vigilantism and the dangers of individuals taking the law into their own hands. Sentencing is set for July, marking the end of a trial that sought justice for a life needlessly taken.
Finally, South Carolina.
The family of Holly Jenkins has reached a confidential settlement with a private community on Hilton Head Island following her horrific death in 2023. Holly, a 69-year-old grandmother, was killed and partially eaten by a 10-foot alligator while she was walking her dog. The lawsuit against the Spanish Wells Club and its Property Owners Association alleged that the community failed to live up to its promises of safety. The family argued that the management was well aware that alligator attacks were on the rise in the area, but made no real effort to mitigate the risks. They had even publicly promised on-site alligator risk management services, which residents relied upon for their safety. The tragedy unfolded when Holly's husband and son found their dog alone in the backyard, and eventually discovered Holly face down in a nearby pond, with the massive alligator still lurking close by.
The settlement was approved to avoid the expense and public nature of a full trial. While the amount remains confidential, the legal victory highlights the responsibility of private communities to protect their residents from known wildlife hazards. The Jenkins family's complaint stated that the community's authorized representatives were responsible for managing these dangerous animals, but failed to act even as the risks became more apparent. Holly's son had to witness the aftermath of the attack, a trauma that no family should have to endure. This case has brought renewed attention to the management of alligators in residential areas of South Carolina, where human and wildlife habitats often overlap. For the Jenkins family, the settlement provides a measure of peace, though it cannot replace the loss of a beloved grandmother who was simply enjoying a walk in her own neighborhood.
That concludes our daily briefing. Thank you for joining us as we covered these important stories. We will be back tomorrow with more updates. Have a safe and thoughtful day.